Thanks for this presentation. Hello. Good afternoon to all of us, all of you, and all of us. I'm really happy to be here with you around the artist curated by Jason. That's a nice opportunity to talk together after the opening of the show Roots That Twitch for the Sky yesterday, in the framework of the CPB. Thanks to the Goethe Institute and Katharina, thanks to the Biennale for this great invitation, this nice exhibition we could share yesterday and will continue to think about. So that's a nice opportunity to talk together today with all of you, 4 artists, part of the show. We are 12. The team is 12 artists, plus Jason, who is, as you know, Jason is an artist and he curated the show. So that's really always really interesting to visit a show curated by an artist as a curator, developing a dialogue with the other artists he invited. So, and that's really interesting to talk together today under this idea, this statement for the Biennale, why photograph? Of course, that's a good question, always. Of course, we can understand why photograph in this very special moment of the medium, of the history, of the images, the image making, because it seems that it's kind of mainstream statement, but it seems that we are all photographers now. But what does it mean? We have only camera phones in our pockets, but does it make us photographers? Today we are talking with art photographers, and that we will raise these issues of working as an art photographer in this huge field of the image making culture we are sharing from now on globally. And it's not about making a difference, but approaching the very specificity of the activity of these artists as photographers. And I would enjoy to propose some other questions. Why photograph, of course, is relevant, but I would say maybe for art photographers, there are more questions every day in your practices. What photograph? How to photograph it? And many others. What is your style? What kind of forms I can imagine in order to make a photograph? Because you don't take a photograph, you make it. Art photography is really about image making, not only taking something in the reality, but imagining a very specific image. And the very first question I would like to ask to both of you, and then we will continue the dialogue, is from where are you photographing? In the post-68 revolution, we were used to say, I was just born in 68, so I wasn't saying this at that time, but at a moment of my life, I began to say this in, I don't know, during roundtables or classes, as I've been teaching a lot. From where are you talking? It was a very common question. From where are you talking? It means from what background, from what culture, for what position, for what social background, from what cultural background. So that's important always to, in order to know each other, to understand better the person with whom we are talking, to ask, from where are you talking? It's not an aggression, it's a curiosity, and art invites us to be always more curious about every kind of life forms. And so from where are you talking? From where are you photographing? It means from what position? Of course, it means the very important relation of photography and photographers to a place. Simply put, photography is really related to the connection between the photographer and the place where he is photographing. And we have access to this place and the different gathering of life forms in this place they experienced and photographed, where they made a photograph for us. But we have access to this place through their knowledge, their understanding of this place we maybe never experience and will maybe never experience in the future. So photography, of course, is really about knowledge. Each photographer working in the art photography field is producing knowledge. And this knowledge is not academic. It comes from intuitions, it comes from his own culture, life, fantasies, dream, family history, friendships, curiosity, search for understanding better his own position in the world, not only as an artist, but as a person, as a human, and as a life form connected to other life forms which are non-humans. So, simply put, this is the way, it seems to me, you are working from the basis, the beginning, each time you make a photograph. And so I would like to ask you, from where are you photographing? Because following the subtle curating and very committed curating by Jason, I could answer the question, but of course I haven't got the answer. The first answer could be Tamil Nadu. This is very important in this show, your connection in different respects to Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu, geography, landscape, culture. And so, of course, I invite you to talk about your own relation to Tamil Nadu, but moreover, from where are you photographing, what position, what imagination, what wish to share the knowledge you are creating while you are making a photograph. So I would begin with you, Vivek, as you, in your work, you offer us a possibility to discover in a concrete way, in a direct way, very composed in terms of volume, surfaces, and colors and lights, but you are giving us a glimpse of the everyday landscape or some aspects of the everyday landscape of Tamil Nadu. So please.
Hi everyone, thank you for making me today here. So to answer your question in a very simplest way, I think my images are made from the fact that, as you said, trying to understand the landscape in the first place, because that's where it all starts from. Especially this set of work, which was made in my hometown Europe, it's been made after a very long time after I started photography. I started doing photography around 2009-10, but then this work was made in 2021, almost a decade after I started photography. Even though I've been shooting this landscape specifically as soon as I started photography, but then to achieve the kind of images, like to start seeing the visuals I've finally seen in this place, which I've always been existing alongside with me. It took me a while in terms of acquiring knowledge, experience, as well as trying to simplify the visuals that I want to present to somebody else or even to myself. To begin with, most of my visuals were inspired from literature that I started reading. Some of the images were made from the literature, or like the landscapes that were painted by writer Vaanyerum in his several works, because he's a prominent writer who hails from my part of the country, and he's been writing about the landscape quite extensively for a while. And almost all of my works, the landscapes that I've shot, they were shot at a particular time because of the stories or the narrations, the dreams that I've read in these works. And I wanted to bring out those visuals firstly, and then on top of it, I'm just layering with my experiences as well, and how I see this place and how I see these colors. And this includes the inputs that I've gained over time with my professional, commercial side of my works as well. That's why the images that you, as you said, like are very composed, are very, for a lack of better words, I'll take yours, more efficient in terms of making the image. It's all these things that come together for me to like enable me to like take these or like make these images in such a way that portray a dreamlike landscapes that is usually not seen by people. So that's something that I started with.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivet. I will go back to Jason later, but I would like to ask Kritika at first, because there is an interesting curating in this show. We have the possibility to discover places, but also very special relations between people in a very intimate way. I mean, in the private sphere of the family, and in your work, your relation to your mother. And it's absolutely beautiful, the work you've done.
Thank you. So
and there are 3 parts in the show, 3 aspects of your researches. We could go back in a second moment about the other aspects, but how do you talk about this relation with your mother publicly in terms of an exhibition? How do you deal with it?
Right. So I'd actually like to start from like your question, which is like, where are you photographing from? And because it's such personal work that I decided to do out of nowhere, I think it comes from a place of curiosity personally. Like, what are these stories that I keep hearing from childhood, from you know, in the family, from my mother, from my grandmother, of you know, the community, but these images don't exist around me. Like, I don't see this in popular culture, or I don't at least see it in the way that it is experienced or has been told to me. And so for me, it actually started out as like a research into very simply, oh, what do my ancestors look like? Because I know I can see other parts of, I can see the history of Tamil Nadu. I see, oh, the rulers, the traders. I can see all of their images somewhere. So how do my people look like? And I think I started with the book Tudan there, and then also like an imagination from a personal space of, you know, what does imagery coming from the Dalit community from Tamil Nadu look like? And it is not the lack of written word or visuals around it, but maybe maybe I don't see it so much around me. So like, how do we normalize it? And so I think my attempt with my work was that. And yeah, so I think with the 3 parts, one is extremely personal, the one that I make with my mother. And in relationship to, I mean, with your question as to how do I, you know, look at it, my relationship to my mom, and also looking at it as something that exists in the public space now. I think for me, again, I was thinking very less about how is it going to, you know, end up looking as a relationship between us, but also like our relationship to our identity almost, because I had up until that time not really spoken about our community, our history so much in depth with them, because that's just not something that comes up so much, even though it's always layered in all of our life experiences. You don't sit and talk about it or discuss it so blatantly. But I think when we were making this work together, and we were reading Bama's writing, and then we were trying to relate to the text and be like, oh, this is exactly how I imagine this scene would have happened in her village. So it's across landscapes, it's across time, but we are able to imagine that because it's just a slice of our life again. And so I think I was thinking more of us relating to this overall identity, and maybe still less personal, of just me and my mother. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we will go back in a second moment about history of Tamil Nadu, but and thank you so much for your answer, because there's an interesting thing I noted while looking carefully at your beautiful installation in the show. It's the fact that these quotes were published, I would say 1 year. That's it, 1 year or the year when you were born.
I was born. Yeah,
so once again, from where are you photographing? We are going back to the origins. I don't know if it makes sense for you.
Yes, yes, yes. I noted that as well, I think. But then, yeah, so the fact that the text is still relevant today in such a large way, I think it's kind of bittersweet in a way. But yeah, it's like going back to the roots again. And that's not something that I think now as a generation, we are looking at it in a more cultural way. Yeah, so.
Thank you. We will go on further, but at first let's ask Alina, from where are you photographing?
Yeah, so I think it's the everyday I photograph from, the everyday being very much a part of it, but also is the people around me, immediately around me, whom like watching every day, like people who I like to watch on the metro or like while I'm in the auto rickshaw, and it's like them going about doing like their everyday things, which really inspire and make me think about like what constitutes the everyday, and like these little actions that we're doing, like sometimes we hardly think about it, but what happens when we start observing these like actions, and also with like dreams. My work comes from dreams. It comes from thinking about memory and time, very specifically about how memory can be so volatile, it can be so unreliable, and at the same time we hold on to it so dearly, and when we don't remember something, you know, how fiction takes over and we're like, oh, this could have happened, you know, it happened like this, I'm very certain, and then somebody in the family is like, no, I don't think you were there. You know, so it's things like that. I think that there's like this constant push and pull of what we ourselves remember of our everydays, which I think is where my work comes from. Of course, there's literary influences, specifically, you know, black writers writing about, you know, their point of resistance and like where that comes from, and how their everyday has been sort of fractured in so many thousand ways, and how we need to be very cognizant of it. And of course, like while I'm drawing from this literature, it's very much me as a queer person in Madurai, you know, trying to make sense of, you know, what is this like queer desire, or like, you know, what are these spots that queers go to, and then, you know, the role of like a woman or a daughter in a family, and that too, and how are you negotiating these spaces? Yeah, to just keep it place.
Thank you, Alina. And now I'd like to ask Jason from where he is curating.
A few years before, in Chennai only, I got to go to see some exhibition, and I saw the work. The work is very close to me. The person also very know him. I know him very long time. When I start photography, also I try to do the subject, but I'm not able to do the subject because the subject is really intense, and it's very difficult for me. But when I looked at the work in the way of presentation, I said to me, there are so many work there in the same place, but that work really took me as being a photographer. For me, it's not really the way, not really presented. And there's a way to say that if you are telling your own story from the community or from the land, you know very close to that, then you know the very well. So then I thought about that day, if I had a chance to show this work, how I'll be. So that means that curators, like being presenting my work. I think every photographer is a curator now, one way of making a book, one way of editing your own story, and even when you're making a book, we decide that which size should be in the title of. So that's kind of a curation, I believe that. So then it started me, then I do some then Ranjit invited me for to do that show. I was part of the co-curating. So then I was so much involved in that. I know how inside I'm telling the story. So then that is and then here looking at the larger landscape is Tamil Nadu, and here in Tamil Nadu we have a long history of literature, like Sangam literature. Now we have contemporary literature. We have music. There's so many generations to Ilayaraja, A. Rahman, and now we have younger music generation. Then we have a sculpture from Chola period to contemporary artist. Cinema we have 100 years of cinema here. Now we have Arun is here. Arun is also a wonderful filmmaker, contemporary filmmaker. But in photography, through British people, photography came to Chennai very early times. But there is no movement here, such like literature, like other arts here. So then being a photographer, for my own study, like I looked at the way what's happening. Then, like 5-6 years before I did a workshop with Kuwait Limited. So the students asked me some questions. Now when you show your work, it's very land rooted, but when you're showing your work, always outside. Can you show some more Tamil Nadu photographers? So then I start myself as the questions want to respond for myself. I start looking at what's happening in Tamil Nadu. Then I come to see Vivek work and Sridhar work, Shati's work, and Shankar, and that's how I what's happening. Then I met Alina in her place 3 years before. First time she wrote to me, I have a dark room, come to. But I met her, then I see she was showing some bunch of photographs. Oh, and I discovered she has a book. Then she's very shy and so that's how she studied from India. I think same here in
CPB,
some
the
workshop,
portfolio
review. She came to and she met Anna. I'm from NAD, and then like this I discovered. Then I said here's something like a new kind of a narrative. So that's how I discovered myself. Then last year I did a Shisa fellowship with Coach. That was Dalit aesthetic. Then here in Tamil Nadu, things are happening. Then local festival. Then I came to tell the story from one place, photography where it's coming from. But also curation also always in India, like everywhere people there's some position here. Then being a photographer, I see my own stories.
Yes, it makes sense. It's very interesting because we are always, I don't know you, but I'm always very interested, not only because I'm a curator as well, but I'm always very interested by artists who become curators, who make curating proposals, because their exhibitions are different than classic curators. I mean, curating is never only about making a list, displaying in a space works made of words and images and thoughts and knowledge, but you created a team. It's also, there are secret stories, of course, in the story of about exhibition making. And it's also about friendship. I mean, friendship through an artistic activity. It means to share many ideas, many interests, and some roots that reach for the sky. So it's also a team building and team making, curating a show like this.
Initially, there was a 60-50 photograph list in the thing, then it's very hard to, and this kind of was a beginning. And when we were working together with Katrina and Varun and the team, then we made 10 photographers. So it's very hard actually, when you a big community, like big history of big rich, and we have so much talent here. But then I have to take a call because there's so much money involving, like, we have to. So then this so 12 is not enough actually. We have so many talent, and then I have to take a call, and this is like my way of how I looked at photography, the place, like, and also recently I'm going outside, like in Nepal, I'm going there, I see local talent in Nepal. When I go to the, I never been Bangladesh, but I care about what happened in Bangladesh. Recently I went to Japan, I see the Japanese photographer. So everywhere there is a local voice. So then I thought about why, then we never had such a, like, like this kind of lineup. Then I have to take from my own kind of aesthetics, what I like photography. So from there, like, I thought about it. When you go to read some collection of short stories, like her work is collection of her childhood and her connections, time and memory. Her like in literature come from and so it's kind of the curious thing. I feel like a collection of different short stories and package of one different collections of short stories.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's really important, this interest you have for other photographers, other artists, and composing the show, inviting us to discover many aspects of this land, this place, or these places, because of course landscape is just a category, and it's more than landscape. It's about geography, for example. It's about architecture. And Vivek, I'd like to ask you, how do you photograph? How are you making these photographs exhibiting in the show? I mean, because it offers glimpses on very specific aspects, and of course, like curating is making choices, assuming to make choices, reducing the list, and then composing a nice display, and so with you we have access to the places composing the everyday life of Tamil Nadu, or places you know or discovered and strolled by. So how do you make these photographs?
So these set of images, when I was making them, it was not about, okay, I'm going to go out and make images of landscapes per se, but it was more of an exercise for me to, like, firstly go out and witness, start looking at places, start looking at visuals that you will be looking at on a daily basis. So the lockdown unfortunately gave me even though we couldn't get any work out of it, but then I managed to get a lot of time in my hand, and we had like places to go to, and like I had to move back to my hometown, and that enabled me to like visit places that I would normally go to, or like even revisit places that I already seen, but I not really witnessed because like I haven't seen it properly for what it is. So these images were made from there. Like it's not about pretty fields or like nice sunsets, but rather we are gonna I'm gonna show the landscape for what it is firstly. In terms of, even though I am from the locality, I know most of these places. Even then, it is very hard for me to go to several areas to shoot, because still all these landscapes have these certain things in terms of like where I come from, who I am as a person, like what part of the city I am allowed to go into. And the deeper the villages you get into, it's not like you can go to any street and take a picture of a house. You will be asked questions. So all these things go into this process, and I think that made me very conscious of what I'm shooting as well. I'll be like, if I'm designed to make a picture of this particular bare wall on a street side, then I'll have to think twice about, okay, how am I going to show it, and I didn't want to make everything, you don't want to label it as aesthetics, good aesthetics. That's not what we want to look at as well. I want to talk about the landscape, the architecture, the built environment. So this is a word that was given to me by a friend of mine back, and that stuck to me. The environment that's being built by people, and how people are affecting the environment that's being built for them, but also the environment affects the people as well. So that has stuck with me, that idea, and that's how I've been looking at landscapes ever since. this work started with a initial work that I did in Sweden during my artist residency in 2019, where I was supposed to make pictures of intimate places while talking to people across the town. But then when I went to Sweden and I landed in this small town, I realized the Scandinavian culture of how people are like, how they, the privacy, how they view their spaces and how they let other people into it. That whole idea changed for me when I landed there and when I started taking pictures over there. And I think taking from there, I'll have to be conscious and I'll have to be more articulative about like telling people what I'm actually doing and how I'm going to take these pictures and all those things. So that practice gave me a little bit of help when taking pictures in my hometown, where I don't have to particularly answer to people, but then I'll have to answer to myself in terms of what I'm shooting. So that has given me the visual language that I just kept on going with. And also coming from a small town, moving into a big city, hoping to make money to go back and build a home back home. All these things comes into your mind. It's all about having a home for yourself. And in every single picture that you make, it's all about finding a piece of home, either that you're going to make or that you are like dreaming about in all these places. So that's something that I keep in mind when I'm making these images.
It makes sense. The image as a home,
Yes.
possible home. And so from geography and architecture, we are evolving to history because you began to talk about it, Kritika, but that's really interesting in the show to read your book, your photo book, made of images, not made by you, but from archives. You dig in. And so I'm really interested in listening to you about this need, not only this desire, this need to participate as an artist in the writing of an history which is not already written. And I know that it's important as well for Jason and certainly for all of you. But you've done it in a wonderful manner in this book. That's very enriching. So how you became, as a photographer, an historian in a way, you know, working in a history-making way as a researcher.
I think in this case then you're forced to become a historian because the history is not there for you to look at. It doesn't exist. It was not there in my school books. It's not there. Maybe it's there in fragments as a reportage and you know, some pieces here and there, and mainly the news. So you're kind of forced to then take the part of a researcher, and I hope I've done it justice, but yeah, so I think in this case I was just forced to do it that way. And it was interesting then to discover the kind of images that exist, the different layers to it, and how deeply connected everything is. And for anybody who's not seen the book, it actually majorly started with reportage images, which was images of the so it is about the whatever kind of images that exists of the Dalit community in Tamil Nadu. And like I said, I was curious to see, you know, what kind of images exist. And the only thing that was immediately available was reportages, crime, you know, images from newspaper, usually very, you know, violent, these kind of imagery. And then I slowly discover publications that are run by Dalit-run organizations. There's Dalit Murasa, which has been doing work for a very long time. They have so many images of volunteers, photographers who were working with them, and they were also very much like first responders. They had to go to the place immediately and take some images so they can show it as proof if they have to, you know, file a case or anything. And they had to do it for the people before something was tampered with, things like that. And there's a lot of Jai Singh's photograph in that, Jai Rani's photographs, a lot of other people that unfortunately I've also not been able to figure out. But I met Alina's dad Henry yesterday, and he was able to give me so much information on like just one particular photograph, and I was just like, wow, I was working in the blind all this while. But yeah, so that was the kind of very violent images was the beginning, and then I wanted to go further back, and I discovered that missionary images were the key because they always worked with underprivileged communities and they brought the medium to the country, and so they had documentation of their work, their life, extravagant lifestyle, and and always people from the community featured here and there and that, and they also play a huge role in the history of the Dalit community in Tamil Nadu as well, because they help fund some organizations that were later doing the work that I discovered, which is the non-profit organizations that were able to document some images in the 90s. So yeah, and then you also discover work like Jairani's, which is so important when she's working as a journalist, but she's also like experimenting with photography, and she talks about how she was not really encouraged to talk a lot about Dalit issues, but then whenever she's working with these women's magazines, she pitches it as stories on women and their issues, and so then that's a way of kind of working in those kind of stories into these magazines, which are, I don't know, I can't imagine what they're mostly about, but yeah, at that time. And so these are completely different images because they are looking at like the everyday life of these people in like a very more humane way, and not sensationalizing it in any way, but also there's just inevitably the labor of the Dalit woman that's there, of any, like all Dalit humans in this entire book, because they are preoccupied most of the time just doing some kind of labor, even if that is resistance or just survival. So I think it was, for me, very interesting to do this job, and I'm actually very glad that I decided to start it. And I think it's still, there's a vast archive that's probably still hidden here and there, and I think it's developing as we speak.
Yeah, that's a very important work you've done, and it's it was really important to discover the presence of the book in the exhibition, and it comes from a decision you made together. And how do you connect the history, the public sphere, and participation in the writing of an unwritten history to the private sphere, the relation to your mother, and there's also another aspect of your work in the exhibition. It's the body and a very specific technique. You used to make these images of the body. So how do you articulate this connection or not?
I think that also then has to do with like the history of this oppression, and this is again universal to all Dalit people, even across borders, that so many things were banned for them, and there's so many rules around everything constructed, and so I wanted to talk about it because I also did not know about it for a very long time. Like again, we don't read about it, we're not told about it. So it's also challenged by people asking, oh, like, but this is in the past, and why do you have to talk about it now, and like it's so violent, and but that's also how we make sense of how we are now with our own history and like what we have done and not done. So I think it's still relevant that way to talk about these very particular details of what happened to our people in the past. And so the particular work that you're talking about are these anthotype prints of my self-portraits of my body, where I'm trying to talk about how the woman's body is central to the caste oppression. And I'm using like these objects that were once banned for the community, like very banal objects like flowers, clean clothes, and many more. The list goes on, and it's still relevant today, sadly. And so I'm using flower pigments to print images of my own body, and I'm trying to talk about, I think, all of these things and trying to bring attention to it in some way.
Yeah, and using flowers in order to make prints, it creates a very intense relation to the place and its life forms, vegetal life forms as well. So a connection between humans and other life forms and their intelligence. And Alina, this is really fascinating to discover the way in the exhibition you are connecting in a different way text and image, because there's a display, a constellation of photographs fixed on the wall with tape mainly, and which is an interesting decision visually, prints and xeroxes and text, written texts. And these texts tell us a fable or a tale, and so it invites us to read your work and to evolve in it, and turning the corner of the walls and continuing the discovery and the dialogue with your imagination. So how do you construct the work in this connection, in this articulation between text and image?
Yeah, I think personally I've been obsessed with this relationship between text and image for a very long time. It initially started with like, okay, let's make a photograph of something, possibly in a metro, and write observational text of whatever I see around. So a woman's carrying like a pink handbag which has like a specific kind of embellishment on it. Like I want to like write about things that I'm observing, but in relation to this photograph that's been made, perhaps in the metro, outside or inside the train, doesn't really matter. But then this question about the possibility that text offers, right? I think we're like overburdened with like, I mean, we're constantly being bombarded by like a billion like images, right? So, and most of this we're seeing in like, it's very interesting. Like you'd see like a very disturbing picture of like, a child in Palestine, and then you scroll down and then you see like a kitten that is like in Christmas outfits or whatever. And this sort of like schizophrenic like viewing of images, right? I felt that there is a need, and there's a very interesting entry point that text offers to this very schizophrenic viewing that we are engaged in on an everyday basis with images. And for me, I do want it sometimes for text to also be perceived as image, and for image to be perceived as text and to be read. And I think there is this really nice sort of juxtaposition and jugalbandi that's happening between these two. And I wanted to really like examine that with my own personal work, especially because, and what sort of allowed that sort of freedom was how time is perceived in my work, which is it's not linear time. I'm sometimes talking about like mythical time, like drawing from the stories I've heard of like goddess Meenakshi and the story of the third breast, disappearing when she saw Sundaram. But then how can I make sense of it, and how can I use this sort of like this fable-like technique that is that's almost like prophesized, and this prophecy writing into talking about, into leaving spaces for the viewer to come in, right? So in my text, if you see the show, you'll notice that I've left some blank spaces precisely because I want the viewer to come into it, to put them, to see themselves in those blanks, to fill it in their own context. And I think, much of this sort of, to make one's garden, I've always thought about making a sequence or a body of work as one would make a garden, right? Like you would pick up all the flowers, the flowering plants that would like stretch out through the year, like some might flower during like the earlier months, and then some during spring, and then we still have like the succulents that are like super interesting to see, and yet you don't have the responsibility of like watering them every other day, but they linger there, they are like almost demonstrative of some sort, right? And I think to think about it is that, I mean, obviously inspired hugely by like, for example, like Derek Jarman, who was a gay rights activist, a poet, fantastic writer. He made this beautiful book called Modern Nature, which I think everyone should read if they can. You guys should read it. It's because it really has, in my head, like, that's what I mean when I say like I'm an artist, or to even think about what is an artist, or what does it mean to be political through your work. So it's that, and I think the poetics of things, right? Especially in environments that are like, where thinking and dissent and thought can easily be censored. I feel like artists play such an important role because they have this liberty to like make you curious about something, right? They're like, okay, this can also be said like this, and what is the, when I say like to drink the distance, right? I'm not saying we're like walking the distance, I'm saying to drink the distance. Like, what does that mean in the sense of to talk about one's body, right? My work specifically, especially this one, is looking at, it's called the Liturgy of the Lost Bird, and it's looking very specifically at like ritualistic practices. In the context that I come from, I grew up in a Catholic household, so it was, the liturgy meant that this is how like Sunday Mass would proceed one after the other. And there is time to, talk about the Eucharist and be like super reverent of it, but here I'm positioning the protagonist herself as she's offering her body to like be the Eucharist, right? She's also, the body is also like pulled in so many different directions. This writing was done during like, my mom was diagnosed with like breast cancer, and then I was thinking a lot about body mutation and what sort of happens when somebody loses a part of their body, and do they become less of themselves? So do they now have air to add to them? Like, there was all these like thoughts in my head which also came into the writing. So yeah, it's like deeply personal work, like similar to Vivek and Kritika's, and yeah, it's been really interesting to see how people have been engaging with it, for sure.
Thank you so much, Alina. It's wonderful listening to the four of you and thinking about the other artists in the show, reminding that making a picture in the art field is always political. And that's why I proposed the term poelitical, because listening to you, and we understand the connection in a very specific way for each of your works, the connection between the political and the poetics. And I really remind the moment when Jason, some time ago, 2 years ago, offered me, in order to let me understand better the Tamil Nadu very specific culture, and more than that, the very specific importance of the Dalit culture, you offered me poetry books. And that was a wonderful initiation as a beginner, someone who knew nothing about your culture. So poetry is so important for all of you, it seems so. And maybe Jason, could you tell us about this way of curating, of gathering together these wonderful artists with a poetic view, a poetic mind, which is yours as well?
Yeah, as I said earlier, it's very tough to choose artists. Then I listened to each, finally I thought about it. I want to show something new to this lab. So then I listened to the work carefully. So it was very intuitive. It's hard to say that. And it took me 6 months. I've been keep working with a couple of 50 artists. From keep looking at. We have a deadline with CPB and Katrina, the Jason, finished the artist list. He sent to me. He said, "Varun, send me message, Macham, send me the artist list." And it was hard to me that. Then one early morning I woke up and 3 o'clock and keep looking at 50 works again and again. Then some picture came in my head, like very intuitive. So I made the name and sent it to them. Then I came the next day, I presented the work here, and we loved the artist. It's very organic. And then the results, I felt like that we are multiple, like we are very complex here, and that's the beauty of it. We are not like a one, Then I felt like that the work will speak to the people. So I didn't have a concrete mind of choose this, I want this, I want no. It was very intuitive, and I feel like in any form of work it happens in one way. So I make my work, also if I give it enough time, it forms itself. I think this also the list forms itself. Within the pressure moment, we have deadlines, and that's how it happened.
Thank you for your very inspiring words, for you when enriching our lives, understanding that every artist practicing photography in her or his own way is a poet to my eyes. And Satish also in the show made in the final slide of his double projection, his video diptych, he put the term of visual poetry, and that's important. And we've been talking about it, Satish, in Arles when we met 2 years and a half already ago. We talked about visual poetry, and so because I discovered your work your fantastic work in this exhibition in Arles, and I met a poet. Simply put, I met a poet with Satish, and thanks to Jason, because I met some other different kind of poets, you are as photographers. So let me tell you my admiration and thank you so much for that, for staying and working as poets in our lives and in our difficult times, because more than ever, we need artists and poets in order to reopen our imaginaries. That's the most important thing in a way, and you're participating in a beautiful way in this reopening of our imaginaries. Thank you. Is it time for questions, or I received signs for timing, so.
Other thoughts, but maybe just 5 minutes. Yeah, in case of like maybe 1 or 2 questions if anybody has. I mean, most of us are going to be around if you want to meet and speak with.
That's it. There's a program. So yes, maybe we could continue the discussion in a more informal way.
At the coffee break.
Which is always a nice place where to gather, the coffee break. Thank you so much. Thank you.